Bitcoin is love. Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is relentless optimism. And Bitcoin is good vibrations, Max.
True. Absolutely. It's vibrations. Everything is vibrating. Everything is vibrating. The earth, the stars, the rocks, the plants, the fish, the water, the air. It's all vibrating. And so is Bitcoin. And Bitcoin is going to synchronize the vibrations of Bitcoin with all the other vibrations in the multiverse. And that's the Bitcoin singularity.
And speaking of good vibrations, of course, I must tell you about our two sponsors of this most excellent episode of Orange Pill Podcast. We have swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. The amazing news is, of course, that they are now available globally for almost all people internationally and via wire transfer only. So go to swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. And good news at thesunexchange.com/orange pill is that the Nimbe project is officially totally financed. That's, the solar panels are going to be installed. So we're going to keep, on top of that progress of that operation. But, there are new projects up on thesunexchange.com/orange pill. Let's quickly do a very good vibrations little ad from them.
Sun Exchange is the world's first peer-to-peer solar leasing platform. Earn Bitcoin solar power in communities in Africa and be part of the new world economy. Visit thesunexchange.com/orange pill and start monetizing sunshine today.
Okay. I always like that, that ad, that woman's voice. So calming and soothing. She gives me good vibrations.
I play it at night when I'm trying to get to sleep. It's beautiful. It's like a little lullaby.
That's me singing to you, honey.
While I'm sleeping, the Satoshis are stacking up.
That's true. And you know what? I bring up these good vibrations because Max sent me via DM. He sends me DMs, right? Through our minds, like our minds are connected. And this remarkable story. And that is scientists discovered broadcasting the sound of a healthy coral reef on underwater speakers in dead areas along the Great Barrier Reef resulted in life returning and thriving. Twice as many fish visited those areas with speakers versus spots without speakers. So there's apparently a sound that living, breathing, filled with life, coral reefs actually have. And if you play the audio of that sort of sound, it actually encourages life to return to dead zones in the Great Barrier Reef.
Nothing's ever dead. So the vibrations, right? Sound is a vibration. So it attracts the vibrations of nearby vibrations. And everything is swimming in the vibrational sphere, the sea of vibrations. But this is really interesting. So it's fake it till you make it. You've got a dead coral reef. They play the vibrations of a living coral reef, and you've got a repopulation of that reef as fish kind of swim over as they're curious about those vibrations. And since they're over there, they're like, hey, nobody's over here. I think I'll stay here. And then they bring another fish. And then pretty soon it's repopulating that previously dead coral reef. And it shows something about how we all can tap into a rebirth, Renaissance 2.0, by understanding the vibrations all around us. And the Bitcoin vibration oscillating at was it 6.25 Bitcoin per 10 minutes, I believe, is the current emission schedule. It's oscillating at that rate is one way to look at it. And it's attracting not only capital, but it's attracting hearts and minds. So now you've got the philosophers, you've got the deep thinkers, you've got the radical thinkers. They're realizing that, hey, the way to, I've got a vibration. I might be working on some painting, some art, some writing, and I'm vibrating at my own vibrations, and I need to synchronize with the Bitcoin vibration so that I get distribution. So I'm locked into the present. Right. So the Bitcoin is the cosmic present, and it's vibrating at the cosmic present. And that shows that it's all around us, this idea.
Right. Because chances are on brink of second bailout from banks, and we have a fiat system, and we have that fiat system filled with zombie corporations, with predator banks, with opioid overdoses, zero wealth creation, no velocity of money. And into this comes this vibrant, relentlessly optimistic cypherpunks building, wealth creation, money velocity in the Bitcoin space. And that could be saving the entirety of humanity, because it's going to save the entirety of the economy. You can see that in places like Nigeria or anywhere with hyperinflation where the currency is dying, dead currency, dead reef, dead, those Great Barrier Reefs, the coral reefs are the source of a lot of the life in the oceans, for example.
Yeah, Bitcoin is living money, and it has regenerative properties, whereas fiat money is obviously dead money. It is vibrating at a very, very insignificant vibration, like all things vibrate, but nothing about fiat money's vibration attracts anything but evil. It attracts nightmares. Gold is also vibrating, but it doesn't seem to be attracting much attention either. It's not regenerating anybody's economic life, gold. People are walking away from gold. The money that's vibrating and living at an oscillating rate that's attracting spontaneous combustion and the global unconsciousness revelation that's revealing the face of Satoshi is Bitcoin.
Right. As Paul Tudor Jones had said about a year ago, he said, Bitcoin is a bet on the future of humanity and on, human ingenuity, and humans evolved with, they evolved this currency. They created this currency to take us, this money to take us to the next level of human existence. And, by the way, this is also this vibration sort of notion is what we do with our own circle of good, right? And of relentless optimism here on Orange Pill Podcast. So if you go into our Telegram group, t.me/orange pill, as soon as like either a dead soul or an angry person, like negative vibes happen in there. And what happens? A dead zone follows, right? People don't want to talk in there. People don't want to communicate. People don't want to share. As soon as, a negative vibe arrives, then you kick those out and you just focus on the relentless optimism and the positive vibes. And that's our happy space. It's a nice space to be, and it's a safe space to be, because you can just be creative and you can share and you can be and you can vibe with everybody else.
Yeah, Bitcoin is solving the synchronization problem in a number of different ways. And so this idea of synchronicity is a huge idea. Just like the economics of Hayek never came to full fruition, or the Austrian economist, because it was considered to be impossible to separate state from money. Now, because we have separated state from money, we do have the possibility of a Hayekian type economic model flourishing, and Austrian economics can be practically implemented for the first time. And it's the same thing with the synchronization of consciousness that would engender global epiphany. And it's something that religious prophets have hinted at, various artists have hinted at, poets, seers, shaman, talk about it. And now with Bitcoin, we're going to realize it.
Now, let's read this one quote here to show you, demonstrate how, all life is just a reflection. We're all fractals of life around us. And we evolved out of, single cell amoebas and things like that, organisms. So I want to show you why all that relentless optimism, how it creates good outcomes, like how it creates more life, those good vibes. This is interesting about these coral reefs, and what they found is that a healthy coral reef sounds like a bowl of Rice Krispies in milk. Snap, crackle, pop. Thousands of invertebrates make this constant crackling, sizzling, static-like sound as shrimp snap their claws and sea urchins scrape over rocks, said scientist Tim Gordon. Punctuated throughout that, you can hear the grunts, whoops, and chatter of many different fishes. A dying coral reef, on the other hand, makes no sound at all.
Right, and of course, water is a conductor of sound much more than air. So when you're underwater, you notice that. So there's a whole cacophony of noise and sounds that are coming from the reef, and this is an invitation to join the party, right? Just like your neighbor's got a massive party going on, and you're like, "What's going on over there? This sounds like fun." So by replaying the party music, you're going to attract party goers, and there's always going to be some rambunctious teen sea urchins will be like, "Oh, I'm going over there. It's like spring break. Where's everybody? Oh, somebody's right behind me. Okay, let's do it."
Yeah, well, they said that the researchers placed speakers playing sounds of healthy reefs and dead patches along Australia's Great Barrier Reef, and found that twice as many fish showed up in those areas as compared to places without speakers or where the speakers were silent. So the healthy reef of all these different members of the community are important. And excitingly, our study found that fish in all levels of the food chain could be attracted by the sound.
Right. It's the vibrations that all attract, and it's good vibrations, man. It's the Rastaman. It's the Coptic religion. It's do a doobie man and get down with Bob Marley. It's kind of funny. Also, the opposite of this, I guess you could say, is when, a lot of people who run convenience stores or little shops, they have a problem of bored teenagers hanging out. So they blast on these speakers classical music, Mozart and Beethoven and things like that. And it repels them, because it's the vibrations of classical music repels the bored teenager. And that seems to work to keep the premises free.
But think of also the protocol, the Bitcoin protocol, and what it does. So why it mentions that it invites the sound of a healthy reef, invites all sorts of layers of the stratosphere of life in the ocean to the dead reef by just playing the music, the sound, of the healthy reef. And why? Because they're all greedy for food, right? Mm-hmm. They want the thing they eat. They hear the thing they eat. They hear the sea urchin scraping against the coral, they think, and they're like, I'm going to go eat that sea urchin. And then they arrive and they're like, hey, this place is pretty empty. I could set up home here, and why not? Why not stay? So a lot of them, as they point out, end up staying and then rebuilding essentially the coral reef there. So that's like Bitcoin. It like invites the greed. You're drawn in by the greed, the speculation, like
the sound
of money, the sound of money, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. And you stay for the revolution, as Max always says. Stay for the love, stay for the hope, stay for the relentless optimism, stay for all that.
The vibration pulls you in and then you stay. Just like the sea urchin at the coral reef was attracted by the vibrations of the music of the previous coral reef. There's great hope in this. And it shows that music is also extraordinarily important in unification and the teasing out of the global unconscious of a love vibe. Music is always very emotionally satisfying in many ways. People are tuned in.
Da, 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 da. Yeah, that's of course the pop cat, right? That unifies all of Bitcoin is the Finnish polka being played by the Turkish guy and the cat singing. So that is the theme tune. That is the vibe of Bitcoin. That's how we vibe. And you know what? I was talking about how we stay for the revolution, stay for the hope, stay for the relentless optimism. And I hope you stay for this interview we're about to throw to, and that is with Gigi. It is mind-blowing. Stay tuned. You're about to have your mind blown. You're about to vibe hard. All right. Well, so exciting to have this mind-blowing guest from deep in cyberspace, and that is Gigi. He's the author of 21 Lessons. He's working on a new book called 21 Ways to Look at Bitcoin. He works also with swanbitcoin.com, who, of course, does sponsor this program. Gigi, welcome to the Orange Pill Podcast.
Hi, Stacy. Hi, Max. Thanks so much for having me.
Are you coming from us from cyberspace or like some other galaxy or dimension?
Yeah, no, it's cyberspace. I'm a big believer in cyberspace. Meat space is very nice still. We need it. We have meaty bodies, but cyberspace is where stuff is happening, where ideas are colliding, where Bitcoin lives mostly. So that's where I am too.
Well, let's start with this concept of time. Bitcoin is time. Bitcoin is a block of time. So elaborate on that if you can. I mean, you don't need to take the whole 45 minutes we're going to have with you, but, give us the condensed version.
Yeah, well, so I published an article, I think a month ago or so, which is called Bitcoin is Time. And it explores the concept of Bitcoin as a decentralized clock, because what Satoshi actually had to solve is decentralize everything. And by everything, I mean absolutely everything. And the problem of telling the time in a decentralized setting where you can't trust anyone and everyone is potentially your enemy is a really, really hard problem. And I explore this in the article, and Bitcoin actually has an ingenious solution to that solves all kinds of problems that we have in our physical universe. Because if you think about it, it's very, very hard to have a definitive time in the first place, because thanks to relativity, we don't have any sense of absolute time. Like, for example, from one side of the earth to the another side of the earth, you have like a 50 millisecond lag always, because there's light speed. And you can't necessarily say what happened before and what happened after if you don't have any absolute frame of reference. And what Bitcoin does is it uses proof of work to build up like a sequence that you can't argue with. And so it builds its own era of time in cyberspace. And I think that's one of the most underappreciated aspects of Bitcoin, that it actually solves a very real problem that was unsolvable before, even like even with the most sophisticated machinery. You couldn't build an absolute arrow of time in the informational realm.
Right. So I'm looking at the essay, Bitcoin is Time. You write that money is essentially a tool to keep track of who owns what to whom. Broadly speaking, everything we have used as money up to now falls into two categories: physical artifacts and informational lists, or to use a more common parlance, tokens and ledgers. You go on to say that the ledger-like nature of all digital information is the root cause of the double spend problem. Information never represents the state of the world directly. Further, the movement of information implies copying, and information exists in one place, and to move it, you have to copy it to another place and then erase it at its origin. This problem doesn't exist in the physical realm. In the physical realm, we can actually move things from A to B. So the informational realm doesn't have this property. If you want to move information from list A to list B, you have to copy it from A to B. There is no other way. Okay, so this sets up the situation, the double spend problem, the problem of digital information, and its reference to time, is that if you, because information is so easily copyable, replicated in the digital sphere, there needs to be a tick-tock, there needs to be a clock, there needs to be time, there needs to be the existence of the past and the expectation of a future. So we need to recreate time. So the double spend problem that is fixed by the Bitcoin protocol also reinvents time, in that, as you write, our concept of time has to do with moving information around. It's always been that way, you could say, right? So this is the clock of cyberspace. So, I mean, that's my first kind of hack at this. What's your comment on that so far?
Yeah, I would say that that's accurate. Bitcoin being the first clock of cyberspace, because when you think of it, information can always be changed. If that's the nature of information. If you can read it, you can also copy it, and if you can copy it, you can also modify it. And that's true for Bitcoin as well, by the way. Like every part of Bitcoin can be read, can be copied, can be modified. The new thing about it is that you have to stay in consensus. Like it builds up this framework where invalid copies may not apply. Like if you have an invalid copy, it will be rejected. But you can copy it. Like you can copy every part of Bitcoin. You can copy the ledger, you can copy the source code, you can copy your private keys, and so on and so forth. Coming back to what you said in the beginning with the difference between physical tokens and ledgers is exactly that the map is not the territory. Like if you want to represent money is just information, what society owes you, so to speak. If you use physical tokens for that, it works very well, because if I have an apple and I give you this apple, you have the apple. Like there is no problem. There is no misunderstanding. But if you put it on a list, like who gave what to whom, and who owns the apples, and who owns the wheat, and who owns the sheep, and so on and so forth. Like if you make a list of sheep, these are not actually the sheep. So you always have to keep them in sync. And that's what I mean when I say the map is not the territory. And it never can be. Like the physical realm and the informational realm is always separated. And we have this problem in computer science as well, that it's related to the Oracle problem, and it's basically summarized as garbage in, garbage out. Like if your sensors feed you garbage, what you do with the information, it doesn't matter, because it's already garbage. And so you will always have this problem. You have this problem with every list, and that's why ledgers immediately introduce centralization, because you have a trusted third party that says, okay, even if it's just in a company, in a warehouse, and you just make inventory, you have to trust the person that this is done correctly, and that the list represents the reality accurately. And what's so ingenious about Bitcoin is that it actually, the map is the territory in Bitcoin. Everything is encoded in the information, and it's encoded in a probabilistic fashion using proof of work. Like by the numbers embedded in the Bitcoin blockchain, you can actually make inferences about the physical world and what happened in the past physically because of computation. That's all. Like when you have information, all you can do with information is transform it. So all you have in the informational realm is computation. There is not a way. That's also the reason why proof of stake and other things will never work. Like it's just it's a house of cards that is built up on itself. And proof of work is the only thing that anchors information in the physical world. And I think it's the only way where you can anchor it in a trustless manner.
Right. So Bitcoin is by nature very optimistic. And what I mean by this is that with Bitcoin, and as you're describing the information as it's compartmentalized into blocks and committed to the timestamp chain, what we can't do is we can't go backwards and change the past.
It gets harder exponentially. Yeah.
Yeah. For essentially, the past is immutable. It's an immutable past. It can't be changed. And this is a different experience for humans, because we know that particularly in the realm of politics, what we face is constant revisionism, this constant gaslighting that goes on, people trying to convince you that your memory is fake. You didn't remember it right. It's wrong. And this is a problem, because when you have a concentration of media and finance, and they're trying to rewrite your past all the time for political ends, you end up with a very sad population of unhappy people, because they don't trust their own minds. But since this information is committed to blockchain and it's immutably stored in perpetuity, those games are done. They're finished. We can't really ever go back and gaslight people to that extent anymore. And as a result, concurrently, is that the future becomes rich with possibility and hope, because you're freeing the population from the burden of the constant propaganda from the centralized power authorities, Gigi?
Yeah, I think there is a reason why a lot of Bitcoiners refer to Bitcoin as the truth machine. Like it's very hard, especially in today's day and age, to figure out what is true and what is not. And I would argue that what is embedded in the Bitcoin time chain, a couple of blocks down, it is the most truthful thing that humanity has. Like, as I said before, everything is embedded in the information directly. You can verify it yourself. You don't have to trust any newspaper or any other source of truth. So it's quite something that we have this truth machine, this beacon of truth that you can rely upon, and also you can assume that you can rely upon it in the future. And I think it goes without saying that it makes a lot of sense that a lot of people are very hopeful because of Bitcoin when it comes to the future. Like you can rely on it, and you can also rely on its monetary properties, and you can rely on its purchasing power going up over time, or at least keeping its purchasing power. And I think all of that makes a lot of sense. And it's no surprise to me that a lot of Bitcoiners are insanely hopeful because of it.
Let me ask you about evolution, because evolution, of course, happens through time, through generations, and through history, whether it's in our consciousness or physical beings. And we recently just brought this up on one of our microdose episodes of the notion that Bitcoin itself evolved, almost used evolutionary techniques against Bitcoiners itself. In that, if you think of those very first days of the Genesis block, after the Genesis block, you had people like Matti Malmi, you had people like Gavin Andresen, who, through these faucets, dispersed thousands of Bitcoin around the world to various people. Almost like in the way that nature does this as well. It deceives certain, one species to help another species, to help it spread around, whether it's, say, pollen. The bees think they're getting some great dessert or something, some honey, and they end up spreading all the pollen around in a way that creates the diversity of needed in the, flower population. So that those early days, talking about time, going back in time in those very early days of Bitcoin, and to look on it now and to think of how Bitcoin spread and dispersed to a very diverse population of people all around the world, thanks to those faucets that seem now, when Bitcoin is now a big store of value that all these institutions want to get into, and it's $1 trillion asset. It just seems so bizarre that it was like a primitive, primordial sort of creature at that time. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is it depends on how you look at it. And you could argue that that people are what make Bitcoin work, but you can also flip it on its head, and you can say that Bitcoin is paying people to keep it alive, and Bitcoin is actually in charge, and it has certain wants and needs, and also it has certain certain stages in its development. Like very early on, I think it was a smart thing to kind of stay underground, not grow too quickly, spread out a little bit, only target those people with the best understanding of its core ideals, I would say. And of course, that's also how Satoshi planted it, so to speak. He specifically targeted the cypherpunks and was very deliberate with how he released Bitcoin and where he published it, and so on and so forth. So I think, I really like the analogy of Bitcoin being like its own thing, its own living organism. And it kind of knew what to do in the beginning. And I think that it's kind of still true. I think it's very adaptive because of its incentive system. It kind of knows what to do. And because of its eternal feedback loop that kicked in once the asset had its first price. And I think that's what makes it so remarkably resilient. It's like life itself. Like it knows how to keep itself alive. And if that means paying a lot of people in Bitcoin, then so be it. And if it means spreading the mind virus across populations, then so be it. I think Bitcoin knows exactly what it is doing.
Right. And there seems to be a moment when the protocol came to life versus all of the attempts to make something like Bitcoin that go back 25 years or more. And we'll get to a reference you make in your paper to 1991 in the paper of Haber and Stornetta. But before we do that, I wanted to touch on this idea of Bitcoin as an organism. And if you talk to people like Adam Back and others, they say that, look, everything about Bitcoin was already in place. The one thing Satoshi added that brought it to life, that really was the coup de grace, that really sparked it into its current world-beating form, is the difficulty adjustment, of course, which kicks in every 2 weeks. And it seems to add to this concept of Bitcoin being alive, it seems to know us humans. It seems to know us. It seems to know how to keep us in the game. Gigi, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it is well known now among Bitcoiners that the difficulty adjustment is the magic sauce that makes everything work, and it solves so many problems at once. Like, it solves the issuance problem, it solves the distribution problem, it solves the problem of cryptographic stability, which was actually the main problem of doing cryptographic money, because we still have Moore's law and computers just get faster and faster and faster, and you never know when the next breakthrough in computation occurs. And if your cryptography problem is stable, then you can never make sure that your money stays secure, because if computers get just 10 million times faster than what you came up with 10 years ago, it just, it's laughable for modern computers. And that's why it's so ingenious. Like, it solves so many, the difficulty adjustment solves so many problems at once. And that's since it's this feedback loop and it adjusts itself eternally, that's also what makes Bitcoin unkillable, because it doesn't matter. Like, if, as Ralph Merkle famously said, if half of the planet gets nuked to orbit, it doesn't matter for Bitcoin. Like, if there's a nuclear catastrophe and half the mining farms are offline, it doesn't matter. Like, it's I mean, it's not nice, but Bitcoin will survive it, no problem. And yeah, it's this reactive feedback loop. It makes it seem that Bitcoin knows exactly what it is doing. Like, you need this kind of adaptive behavior to be able to adapt to any environment. And it's you can think of it as being very stupid, like a thermostat, so to speak, but you can also think of it as really, really smart. And often the simplest things are the smartest things, that we see that in slime molds and other, like, quote unquote primitive organisms that are actually insanely smart, but we just don't understand it correctly, I think. And Bitcoin is in the same category, I would say. It's very simple in terms of components, but it's extremely intelligent in its the dynamic properties that emerge from it.
Right. And getting back to what was going on 30 years ago in the lead up to Bitcoin, in your paper, Bitcoin is Time, you write that it goes without saying that causality is of the utmost importance when it comes to economic calculations. And since a ledger is nothing but the embodiment of economic calculations of multiple cooperating participants, causality is essential for every ledger. It is fascinating that all the puzzle pieces that make Bitcoin work did already exist as early as 1991. Haber and Stornetta introduced two schemes that make it, quote, difficult or impossible to produce false timestamps. This first relies on trusted third party. The second, more elaborate distributed trust scheme, does not. The authors even identify the inherent problem of trusting a causal chain of events that would be required to rewrite history. In their words, the only possible spoof is too suspicious, etc., ... And then it goes on 1 year later, I guess the proposition of using Merkle trees was introduced. Okay, so the question, or what I wanted you to comment on, is here's the beginnings of Bitcoin, the amoeba stage. 30 years ago. And at that time, it's just remarkable what do you say to people who think that, who always say, well, Bitcoin just is anonymous. It came out of nowhere. No one knows who Satoshi is. Clearly, it's got a huge lineage. It's got a huge background. It's got the cypherpunks. It's got 30 years of attempting to do something like this. Gigi, your comment.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It has a very rich history. And of course, the history goes back even further because it builds up on a lot of building blocks from cryptography and mathematics and computer science and peer-to-peer networks and all of it. All of those kind of building blocks are required to make Bitcoin work. But electronic cash specifically was tried over and over and over again. And it just never worked because it always came back to having to rely on a trusted third party. And also in the schemes that you mentioned, they were not completely decentralized. They always relied on some third party, on someone in charge of the timestamping server, and or a registry, for example, that keeps all the key material, like the public key material. We have that in the internet as well, like with DNS and other things where you need to register to have a working domain name system. It's very, very hard to build something that doesn't rely on anything else. And that's what's so ingenious about Bitcoin. Your node only trusts your node, like it only trusts itself. Whatever comes in from the external world, it verifies. So not even the time, nothing else. Like you don't trust it, and you don't need to trust it. You always, like, you build up your own truth with your own node, and that's how Bitcoin. That's why Bitcoin is so radically decentralized, because every single node has its own truth, and they all come to the same agreement without really talking to each other. Like you don't of course you communicate and send blocks around, but you arrive at the chain at the same chain tip for yourself. And as you know, the problems that Bitcoin solves, they are very hard problems. You yourself, I believe, worked on electronic cash, and many other people did in the past. And we had eGold, and we had Bcash, and oh my God, I said Bcash now. That's how messed up my mind is already. But we had a bunch of different projects that came really, really close, and there was always something missing. If you go through the history of them all, like some proposals were very, very close to the architecture of how Bitcoin works today. But getting like this last mile right to decentralize absolutely everything, nobody before Satoshi managed it. And that's why all other projects failed, like eGold failed, and also Xiaomi and eCash failed, and they all had the centralized registry in common. And sometimes it was to keep the records, and sometimes it was to keep the time, and sometimes it was to take care of like coin distribution. And there was always one centralized thing left. And Satoshi, funnily enough, without inventing anything new, managed to resolve this problem and get rid of all centralized entities.
Well, let's go back to my thing about evolution, because humans, for the past thousands of years, you see us leaping evolutionarily, not in our, let's call us a token in a ledger. Okay. Our token side is this human flesh. Our ledger is our history, our art, our culture, our consciousness. And we've made leaps. If you look at points like the ancient Greeks, and then the Renaissance, and then the Enlightenment, these huge moments of leap. And a lot of it has to do with money. When we invent a new money, like when the Lydia coin, for example, when we created a standard unit of account for something that, as you say, was already there. Gold was already there. People used gold all over the world at that point. But then creating a standard unit of account caused a leap in human trade and culture, and our advancement as a people. So in terms of this evolutionary thing, like humans, obviously we're primates, we're mammals, but we're something more than that. We have that consciousness, and Bitcoin is money, but is it even more than money? Like that sort of consciousness that it has, it seems like humans have almost, it feels like our relationship with Bitcoin is kind of like our relationship with dogs. You know how we've co-evolved for 30,000 years with dogs, and we're, who's the master, who's the servant in that relationship is hard to really tell. But what do you think of that in terms of like, is this a weird like it was inevitable, right? This is like an evolutionary inevitability.
Yeah, it seems like it. It's really interesting what you point out, because humanity definitely co-evolved with money, and it's very hard to find out when money actually evolved, because the first written records we have are about money. And so money and speech are heavily interlinked as well. Like we coin words, for example, and we coin phrases, and it's like pointing to something and giving it a name is a value judgment in the first place. It's worth naming that thing, and it's like a shortcut to describe it to others. And money and value are like very similar in that regard, that if you build something, make something, provide a service, and you get a token for it, society agrees that this was valuable, and you have like this society, the collective itself owes you one gold coin worth of goods and services, whatever you want to have for the things you did. And out of that evolved also a sort of speech, like money is a form of speech as well. Like it is used to lubricate everything that happens in the economy. Not unlike speech, if people coordinate, you need speech for things to go smoothly. And I think what's so interesting about Bitcoin is it's basically the perfect money. It's very hard to think of an improvement to Bitcoin philosophically, because money in essence is informational. It's the collected information of society, who owes what to whom, who did what. Like again, like if you have money, society owes you something. You can go to society and exchange it for goods and services at any time. And so Bitcoin, being pure information, living purely in the informational realm, is already like the perfect overlap to what money is. And the second thing is what Robert Breedlove also wrote about in his piece, Bitcoin and the Number Zero. It has the terminal inflation rate of 0%. Like there's nothing more perfect than that. If you would have any percent inflation, it's always exponential. So you would have infinity money on a long enough time scale. And of course, if the money supply decreases over time, then after long enough time, there would be no money left. So zero is absolutely perfect. And everything else can be built on top of it. Like if you have these kind of characteristics, right? And in my opinion, they can't be improved. Then with Lightning and other higher layer solutions, we can build everything else on top of the perfect money, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah. So on the origins of money, just reread the Nick Szabo essay, The Origins of Money, and he talks about prehistoric money, what is presumed to be the case, and how prehistoric peoples worked on a system of reciprocal altruism, that they ran into the problem of memory. If, in fact, one group of people owed a favor to another group of people, it would be easily forgotten over time. But by creating a collectible, a token, an object that required work to create, then they could exchange that, and that could be used in the future to reciprocate the altruism that they received in the past. Yeah. And we were also limited in that time to what we could carry essentially on our back. So this is why jewelry became popular, because you could carry it with you, because it's a nomadic tribal people. But you write in the essay under the heading of causality and unpredictability, that this is kind of a different topic. So as the timestamp chain, as it's referred to in the white paper, which we call the blockchain, but blockchain's not used in the white paper, they refer to the timestamp chain. We are saying that the past becomes the past. It's immutably stored in the blockchain, and we're free from revisionism, which I think is a very important concept. But equally interesting is that in order for the future is unpredictable. And this is also important because unpredictability instills in us a sense of wonderment and possibility, which is missing from our society. Right now, we are told that the future is dark and grim, and it's full of threats and violence and state actors and propaganda, and everyone should just stay home. But with Bitcoin, the way the algorithm works, it guarantees unpredictability. Unpredictability is a feature, not a bug, right? And can you talk on that?
Yeah. So the way I outline it in Bitcoin is time is that to have a now, as you said, the past needs to be set and the future needs to be uncertain. And in Bitcoin, since it's a peer-to-peer network, you cannot know what your peers are doing. So you can't know future transactions. And also, thanks to the proof of work puzzle, you cannot know what the solution to the next block will be like and who will find it. And so the future will always remain uncertain in that regard for the Bitcoin time chain. You cannot predict what the content of the next block will be, even if you know the transactions, like even if no new transactions will be broadcast, just the proof of work puzzle alone guarantees that. But you have multiple sources of unpredictability. And that's like, as far as I can tell, that's also how our physical universe works. And that's how reality works in general. Like, of course, there is, as you said, historic revisionism, but in the physical world, at least, you can't change the past. No matter how deep you look into quantum weirdness or relativistic effects, once an event builds up on another event, you cannot reverse that. So as they say, you can't unscramble an egg, like it's, there's some things that once they are done, you can't undo it. And in Bitcoin, that's very, very similar. And we have some atomic building blocks, if you like, that make sure of that. And this is like SHA-256, the trapdoor functions, the hashing algorithm that makes sure that if you have a certain piece of information and you build a hash of it, you can't go back from that. And that's actually literally impossible because multiple pieces of information could fit this hash. So it's something that you can't undo. Like without having a dictionary of possible values before that, you cannot go from the hash back to the original input. And I think that's the most important puzzle piece to understand how Bitcoin builds up its own internal arrow of time.
So let's continue on this thread of humans throughout our history, back to the ancient Egyptians, ancient Greeks. We've always been trying to understand the stars and the universe around us, what is out there. And one thing that emerged was this notion of the Kardashev type energy civilization. When we looked out into the universe with our advanced telescopes, well, advanced compared to the past, maybe in the future, we might have these might seem rinky-dink and backward. But nevertheless, we look for these, the amount of energy that a planet is using to determine whether or not they have a civilization there. So in terms of the energy use and Bitcoin, this has become a real hot button issue. Like many in the mainstream media, our elite don't want us to its use of energy they see as some sort of threat. And in a way that kind of feels weird to me that when we look for advanced civilizations, we look for civilizations that are using all of the energy resources available to that planet. And yet we're seeking to reduce our energy, like to hide in a way. And again, with that notion of this living organism that is Bitcoin, it's almost like it's trying to be found. It's like wants to be found by something that's going to save us out there. What is your response to that? The claim, first of all, just on the simple earthly one of that, it's using too much energy, that Bitcoin uses too much energy. And on the other one, in terms of building up a Kardashev 1 type civilization.
Yeah, all of those are very broad and complicated questions. I think what most critics don't understand is that energy usage does not equal pollution. So those two things are completely different. And I think what's worth pointing out is that human flourishing correlates with energy usage. Like we use energy to survive, and this goes back to something that Max said before with how an economy is like an economy of favors, and you need money to scale. And we did this. It relates back to energy in that sense that if you are a clan and you hunted a large animal and it was too much meat for all of you to eat, and you have no refrigeration and nothing, you might share it with the bellies even of your enemies, because you store the meat in another belly, so this belly might do you a favor in the future. So money and those kind of ideas are what scale civilization, actually. Like money, without money, there won't be scaling above, as Max mentioned before, the Dunbar number of about 150 people, 150 like relationships you can keep in your head, and everything else, the combinatorial explosion is too large. You can't keep it in your head. The human brain is too small to keep all, like the world economy in your head. It's impossible, And so having a perfect money, having like a sound money, as we've seen in the past, it enables cooperation on a way larger scale than what we have now with the fiat system and with just broken money. Like we actually reverted to barter thanks to nation states, since we as you know, like our money is really broken, and now we have all kinds of monies, and just coordinating is really hard. So I'm a huge fan of the idea of the Bitcoin Renaissance and of the science fiction ideas of the Kardashev scale, however this guy was called. But we are now at like 0.5 on this stage. We don't even make use of the energy of the Earth. And I think stage 1 would be making use of all the energy the sun produces, and then it goes to even to galaxies and like solar systems and galaxies. And I think it makes a lot of sense to think about this, because Bitcoin will continue to use a lot of energy, and I think this is very good, because in the end, the world economy will run on Bitcoin, and we want this to be secure. We want it to be tamper resistant, and we can also reduce the amount of energy that current armies, for example, need to keep them alive. Like if we have something that is tamper evident in cyberspace without needing to resort to any violence in meat space, a little bit of energy usage, that's perfectly fine. I think we should applaud it. And the more energy Bitcoin uses, the healthier the system is, and the healthier humanity will be as a whole, because the healthier our global economy and just our coordination will be.
Right. Now, when I tweeted a couple of weeks ago that, we're looking forward to having Gigi on Orange Pill podcast, and he's got this great essay out, Bitcoin is Time. And then you responded something like, I can't wait. I have something for you. Did I read that correctly, or did you have something that you wanted to add?
Yeah, you read it correctly, because I think, and I'll have to see if I can switch the overlay. Maybe you'll understand immediately. Like Bitcoin to me seems to be synchronizing our minds across cyberspace. And as our friend RDBTC here shows, Bitcoin uses human brains, and it's this mind virus that synchronizes the world with its decentralized clock and synchronizes our minds using memes. And I think Bitcoin is such a powerful idea that it can definitely lead to some sort of enlightenment. And it seems to me that you went through this enlightenment, and I would be very interested of hearing your thoughts on that and maybe your experience.
Well, we talk about that on Orange Pill podcast all the time. The synchronization, the universal unconscious, a lot of it comes from Jungian ideas, the mandala, the symbology that's been with us throughout, the abstraction of language and how to try to overcome that. And I believe that Bitcoin, as you would say, is synchronizing in a way that brings about this idea of the universal unconscious. And the Satoshi is potentially a unit of the unconscious, in that we are communicating, as we always have been, with our minds, using our minds, and exchanging Satoshi in a mind space of purely of mind. And so the way this happens is that Bitcoin, as we're saying here, by making the past finite and making the future infinite, you're eliminating fear and you're increasing hope. And when you eliminate fear, fear is a huge drawback. Fear is a huge burden, and it keeps people stuck. And nothing changes without love. Only love has the power to change. Fear keeps everything stagnant. The fear of the central banks and the bankers are that they fear that things are going to change. That's what they fear. And so Bitcoin has a way to, in my view, based on everything we've been saying here, of solving for the problem of fear. Humans are mired in fear. It goes back to fight or flight. It goes back to us emerging. And that would open up this, what I've been saying now for 40 years, what I call the holy dial tone, which is when we're simultaneously essentially on the exact same meme, or the exact same vibration, and then all differentiation disappears, and the concept of ego disappears simultaneously and ubiquitously. So the whole idea of ego disappears, and it gets back to, as you were saying, we go back to prehistoric times, and people in those prehistoric times, they had no word, apparently, from what I hear from anthropologists and the studies and scientists, is that the word for I really didn't exist. People always spoke in the we. We see this, we see that. There was no I. So it could be coming full circle, where we are just basically one. And then if that's true, then we would also be open to experiencing the vibrations of everything around us, the plants, the trees, the rocks. Everything is vibrating, and we're deaf to it. We have a very abstract relationship to reality. I like what you said here. You made reference, Gigi, to, Bitcoin gets us back to how reality really works. That's a very important point. With the way we all live today is not how reality works, Gigi.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think especially the fiat system, it distorts reality. Like it, even now with negative interest rates, as you guys know, like it kind of tries to make time go backward, and that's just not the way the world works. And so we see all kinds of negative effects stemming from that. And my largest hope is that Bitcoin will continue to transform the individuals that interact with it, as it transformed you guys, as it transformed me, and transform companies and society in general after that. Like I think it's the only way the world can change. It's from the inside out, and Bitcoin seems to be able to do that. And I think it's such a beautiful and such a powerful idea that Bitcoin is hope is exactly right. And I also think it resonates with me deeply. What you are saying all the time, that Bitcoin is love, because Bitcoin is the only non-violent money we have. Like it's to get someone's Bitcoin, you need to offer something that is of value. The only exchange that can happen if Bitcoin is properly secured is voluntary, and you have the perfect t-shirt for it. Like it's Bitcoin is love. Amen to that. And I think the world can always need a little bit more love, and I hope that Bitcoin provides that.
Bitcoin is love. This is perfect. It's a perfect moment. I love this moment. And this is the perfect moment to conclude this episode of Orange Pill Podcast with you. Oh, look at that. That's our friend Charlotte Kemp. She did the theme tune with her boyfriend, Sean Lennon, and Bev, of course, from the United Kingdom. Wow, that is awesome. I love that. She's going to love that.
You can be anyone in cyberspace. That's what I want to point out there. So don't be afraid to do something. Don't be afraid to do something crazy. Cyberspace doesn't care. Bitcoin doesn't care. If you're a dog and you do something cool, you can earn Satoshis online. So please go ahead and do that.
All right. Are you feeling really good vibrations there, Max?
Yeah, I feel it. It's a great conversation with Gigi. He's writing all this great stuff, and it just circulates so quickly. You know, I see about it in the Bitcoin community. It ricochets around. People are talking about it and hear about it, and to be able to talk to them about it. You know, it just adds to this cumulative Bitcoin revelation it's all building.
Well, I think, we struck on that, the notion of this evolution and how Bitcoin kind of is a living force. And it really hit me in the head, in that last microdose where I keep on thinking about the way it tricked so many early participants into spreading its pollen, its seed all over the world. And in an altruistic way, right? Like, it seems like massive mega altruism that Matti Malmi gave away $1 billion, right? That's like a scene in a movie, right? Where some guy in like, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou is like throwing money after he robbed a bank. It's just like, woohoo! And he seems like he's the insane but funny character. Well, that's Matti Malmi. That's Gavin. Yeah.
Right. That's right. And that's fine. And now we have a similar situation that Bitcoin 50, 60,000 is going to seem just as cheap in 10 years as we look at Bitcoin from 10 years ago as being ultra cheap.
Yeah. But it's like the sound of the faucet, the Bitcoin faucets they used to have. That is the thing that was like the coral reef story. It's like people hear like ka-ching, 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 drip, 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 drip. And, I remember getting the 5 Bitcoin, I guess, from Gavin Andreessen's faucet. And, it seemed a little bit weird at first because you're like, have to enter your Bitcoin address and you're like, because it was still like, I was still uncertain what it was and how to use Bitcoin. I was like, are they just going to steal giving them my address, entering my address, they're going to steal it or something? And like, I didn't know what it was, but it drew me in. The drip, drip, drip sound drew me in.
Yeah. It's like, semen, right? There's like 100 million semen per ejaculation and only one fertilizes the egg. So that's the early Bitcoiners with like inseminating the global population with keys that resulted in the revolution that got Mother Earth was pregnant for the 3rd time, as Bootsy Collin or George Clinton might say.
Somebody in the comments under our microdose did ask you, Max, to provide more sperm analogies and metaphors. They really
yeah, that's right. Well, it's I'm always learning too. I was fascinated to see that the size relation between the single sperm that fertilizes the egg and the egg itself is enormous disparity. The egg is like this big and the sperm is like teeny, and that's what's the beginning of the embryo, and we see that in Bitcoin all the time. So and Gavin Andreessen essentially ejaculated 20,000 sperm seeds into the Bitcoinosphere, and they ended up fertilizing a revolution along with others. Malmi, some guy you talked about.
Matti Malmi. He's Finnish, the Finnish guy.
Right. He was also
he had one of the first faucets.
Yeah, I know. I inseminated many people with my Bitcoin for free. We used to
Stop using that word.
We used to ejaculate Bitcoin on, cards, plastic cards. Remember that company that would
the Prypto cards, they were called.
Cards,
Prypto, Prypto.
Crypto, right? You could get, people used to hand me Bitcoin all the time on cards, and then I'd give them to somebody else. Or
remember that Exante party in Portugal, in Lisbon? And they had all these balloons and you had to pop them, and they would have like anywhere between 0.1 and 1 Bitcoin in there. And then they gave away to somebody in the room 100 Bitcoin.
Yep.
Which was worth it was maybe worth like $500 at the time. And so they were like balloons. I was popping them all.
Helium balloons floating around, and then you pop them, and then the keys are in the balloon, and they were giving all those away.
Yeah, nobody was bothering with it. Like the people at this party didn't even care about it. I was running around popping everyone and entering.
See them on the floor, like all these keys on the floor, and everyone ignored them.
Yeah,
so you get swept up and thrown in the garbage.
Yeah, those were the magical days. Like I suppose, it seems like like I said, like it seems like how nature tricks a lot, like all sorts of species trick each other. Like in some ways we think we're superior to dogs and cats, but you know, the fact that they're domesticated and like we're the suckers, like taking care of them and feeding them and housing them and petting them and bathing them. Like,
Yeah.
they seem like we have been suckered into taking care of them, right? Like I don't know, their eyes are cute. Like they seem like wagging their tail and you're like, oh, I'm going to feed you and I'm going to take care of you and it's going to cost me so much money. But like, it seems like we've been duped into it, but we get something out of it, right? We feel good inside.
Yeah, there's a symbiotic relationship.
Yeah,
between
symbiotic.
humans and dogs and cats and pets and things like that. So apparently the way the eyeball of humans evolved, you know, there's this enormous white space. I forget what it's called anatomically, the whites of your eyes. But compared to other species, it's enormous. And it's because apparently humans and dogs co-evolved. And it was a way for humans to communicate with hunting dogs when they're out hunting. So they can move your eyes around and the dogs as well. You can communicate with each other silently with your eyes, apparently, if I recall the story correctly.
That is true. And there's actually look online. I'm sure it's been uploaded to YouTube, but look on the coevolution of humans and dogs. We have evolved together for at least 20, 30,000 years. And they did this study. So it must have been a documentary we saw where they compared chimpanzees, who are very close to us in terms of evolution, and dogs. And chimpanzees, you know, they did the ball, you know, food under a bowl, one of the bowls. And the dog will look into the human's eyes because the human will tell them basically where the food is. That's what the scientists did. They were like 3 bowls turned upside down. There's food under one, and the scientist would go like this and look at the bowl that had the food under it. And the dog would like look at his eyes and then always choose the right bowl. Whereas the chimpanzee never did. Like they would like, they don't read our eyes. They didn't bother reading our eyes.
The chimpanzees are competitors.
Yeah.
They're not symbiotic with the chimpanzees. The chimpanzees are out there.
True.
You know, we're competing with for food.
I guess that would be like the 2 Bitcoin fork shitcoins that are like so dumb they can't survive. They're like,
so stupid they can't survive.
They can't read the market.
They're like turkeys in the rain, drowning. They just put their mouth up to the rain and drown to death. Those are the 2 hard forks of Bitcoin. They're just too stupid to live. Well, you know, you need carcasses on the road. That's roadkill. It feeds another species of vultures. You know, vultures feed on the roadkill.
Yeah, well, we see a lot of those here, you know, on the side of the road when the deer and all those sort of animals get run over, opossums, raccoons.
Yep.
And that's just the cycle of life. But
they're born with the ancient memories of these routes that they go, and they use the pheromones, and they use the noises and the sounds and the gravitation of the earth, and they're listening to the cosmic universe. And the idea of a road that's been there only for 20 years doesn't really play into their DNA. So they just walk blindly onto it, and some 18-wheeler flattens them. And they're like, shit, that's fucked up.
You think that's what they say?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're like their last dying thought on the highways. God damn it.
Well, it's got to happen some way, right? For new life to happen. Like, you all got to go some way. And this episode also has to go in some manner.
It ends, but it never ends.
Exactly, because you know there will be another block on this chain of Orange Pill podcasts. It'll happen again, right? And that in terms of that ka-ching, ka-ching, the sound, right? And the next episode of Orange Pill podcast, we're going to talk to the guy from Sphinx Chat. So, you know, there's ka-ching, ka-ching of streaming sats right into our Zap wallet as we speak.
Oh yeah.
And of course, Adam Curry has also helped them out with Sphinx Chat, but he's also helped out Breeze, Breez, or Zed, as you might say in Australia or the United Kingdom. And so, you know, all this evolution of this vibration of this coral reef called the Bitcoin ecosystem is just growing, growing, growing.
I got a new thing coming out called Sphincter Chat. You get a streams of sats when you fart.
Well, you know, the Kardashev scale of like using all energy available to you.
That's right.
That's a sign of advanced civilization.
It's totally advanced.
So that you have to be using all energy available.
I'm converting
to
the methane into Bitcoin mining, by flaring it. So I got, I ignite the fart. It creates energy that I use to convert to Bitcoin.
We were talking to Adam O at Upstream Data about
He
this.
lights his farts?
Well, he has the technology to
Oh, right.
capture
No, he's in the energy business. That's right. That's right.
Okay. So remember, this episode was brought to you by two sponsors who might abandon us now that we've...
Now we just lost these two sponsors.
No,
no longer sponsored by Swan. They just dumped us because of all this flatulence talk.
So swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. Everybody always complains to us that, it's not available for overseas. It's just available for Americans. But now it's available for... Swans don't go bark unless you're trying to do one of these coral reef sort of audio files.
Hey, lady, how's it going?
Right. So swanbitcoin.com/orange pill. Anybody in the world, for most nations, of course, there's some that are not part of the wired, the SWIFT system. If you're not part of SWIFT, you can't access this. But you have to wire your funds in. You get Swan Bitcoin, and I think it's the best rate in the world. If you could find anybody cheaper, let us know. But I don't think so. This is only Bitcoin OG. You can't even sell your Bitcoin there. You can only buy Bitcoin there. And of course, the sonexchange.com/orange pill. We love it. Everybody is super happy with it. And now I guess go over to the listening room on Clubhouse run by Bitcoin Chris. I'm assuming he's back from Cancun, and I'm assuming we're in the room with him right now.